plan is to record the session and put it out on the Advocate site underneath the training site, so you can be able to reference it in future for future training purposes and information purposes going forward. Okay. First and foremost, my name is Sean Palmer. I am with ACT Aspire, and this particular training is targeted for the technology readiness. So this is for all the test administrators and specifically the technology coordinators within your particular district and schools. This will be targeted for making sure that you're ready for the spring admin. We'll review the schedule of events. We'll also review the various components to ACT Aspire and what the system requirements are. We'll talk about supported devices and then various resources that are available to you at the district and school. Now, one thing that might be a little bit different from last year. Last year, this was all brand new for everyone in Wyoming, and there may be a mixture of folks that this is brand new for, and some folks that have participated last year as well. So I'm going to, just to make sure that I cover everything, I'm going to walk through the training like it's the first time everyone's seen this. But I also will highlight a few activities that if you did participate last year and have your system set up, things that are new and different in the system. So it'll be it'll be good information for you as well. Okay, I wanted to go through the computer-based testing. This is the schedule that we have for this particular year. There's a 12-step process that we typically go through in ACT Aspire for online testing. The items that are in red are specific to technology. The other items that are in orange are specific admin type functions. The ones that are in green are specific to testing, and then the ones in blue are after testing. So I'm going to walk through this really quick just to make sure that everyone's on board of what the timelines are and who the personnel is that is expected to perform those functions. First, step one. So what we ended up doing after the rollover back in January was invite everyone into the portal. So if you were into the ACT Aspire portal last year, you still have your access rights, same email address, same password to be able to get into the system. If there are new folks that are into the system, you may have just received an invitation to be able to come into the portal. If you do have, if you are brand new and haven't had access into the portal yet, please feel free to contact the customer service number or check in with your admin. They're able to add new users and remove old users as well. So that particular timeline between the middle of January and all the way through the administration of the ACT Aspire portal will be that timeline. And you can go ahead and add people and delegate various administrative tasks for representative in different roles within the system. The next we have is implementation training, which obviously you're participating in the first one right now. We do have 4 trainings that are scheduled on over the next few months. The first 2 are targeted specifically around technology. So this is the technology readiness, which is obviously today, February 8th. We are going to be doing the same exact training next Tuesday, February 14th. And then we're also going to be conducting 2 additional trainings, one on March 21st, another one on March 23rd. And these are targeted specifically around the test administration. So what do users need to be able to do within the portal to be able to administer the test, and what are they going to be doing on the day of testing? So it's a little bit different audience that participate in those trainings, but I wanted to be sure that we shared those with you. And again, we record all of the training sessions that we walk through, and we make those available on our Wyoming Specific Advocate site. And the Wyoming Department of Education is really good about being able to share those links and keeping you in tune with those various trainings. Step 3 we have is the student data. So in the middle of January, the Wyoming Department of Ed went through and automatically uploaded all of the students that they had in their statewide student information system into the ACT Aspire portal. So what that means is all your students, your 9th and 10th grade students that you have that you've registered with the state right now are already loaded into the ACT Aspire portal under your respective districts and schools. Let me see here. So that data is available. What we encourage you to do between January 23rd and March 3rd is to go through in the student data section and make sure that all your student information is accurate. So we want you to check to make sure that all your roster is complete, and if there isn't, then we need to add those particular students that are missing. And the second part, which goes into the step 4, which is accessibility and accommodation, means that if there's any personal needs profiles or any special accommodations that need to be tied to those students, we ask that you do that between the timeline between January 23rd and March 10th. Step 5, we ask for you folks to go through and create groups. And groups are wonderful in helping organize the creation and touching around test sessions. And they're also very useful after the tests are complete. When we create reports, you're able to generate specific reports utilizing those various groups. So the timeline to be able to do that is between February 1st and March 3rd. Step 6, this is the big part for your tech coordinator folks. We want you to make sure that you're reviewing the technical requirements, the bulletins that we put out, as well as the documentation and configuration to your local technology. So that's the main purpose of being at this particular technology readiness training session. The timelines to be able to do that is beginning of February through March 17th, and we'll give you much more details on what's expected there. Step 7 is test session setup. So starting, actually it's February 14th is when we would like, we make the test sessions or the test forms available, and the room supervisors and test administrators are available to go in and start creating test sessions. They can start doing that February 14th all the way through the end of the test administration cycle. Step 8 is the pre-cache of test content. This is another technology event. So when you create your Proctor caching server, you want to make sure you have the latest and greatest test content. That, again, that date for doing that is actually going to be available starting after April 14th. But the timelines that we have to be able to do that is March 17th to April 7th. So if there's any changes that we have to the system or any new content that we push out, we want to make sure that you always have the latest and greatest content, you know, a good 2 to 3 weeks prior to your testing window. So that's what we say between March 17th and April 7th. You are actually able to do it much earlier, again, starting April 14th all the way to, February 14th to April 7th. So make sure you mark your calendars and plan accordingly to be able to download test content for there. And we'll go through what exactly you need to do that in this particular training. Step 9 is a test administration role where you want to go through and print all your test authorization tickets. So this is in preparation for you getting close to the beginning of the test window. You want to make sure you have all your authorization tickets printed out so that when the students come in to test, that you hand them those particular test tickets so they know what to log in to TestNav and take the actual assessment. Step 10 is the obvious step, starting the test sessions and actually administering the test, and that's going to step 11. So the actual test window for ACT Aspire for the spring of 2017 is between April 10th and May 3rd. Please note that any of you that are the administrators, you can plan your testing anytime between that window. You could actually administer 2 or 3 subjects at the beginning of the test window and the last part towards the end. That's completely up to you, or you can do it all one day. We see a wide gamut of how those are set up. So the system's set up in a way to be able to be configurable for your needs. And then last but not least, we do some post-test cleanup, and that's just making sure that anything that we have from students that weren't able to be able to take the test, that we just write down when those are noted and what the specific reasons are. So that's the 12 steps of the entire test window. And this can be found out on the Spire Wyoming specific advocate site, as well as I believe the Wyoming Department of Education also sent it out in the newsletter as well. All right, so let's move right along here. So the computer-based testing components, they're actually derived of 4 different components. The first is the ACT Aspire portal. So the portal is what you access from your browser. It's an assessment administration portal. So you're managing student data, the test sessions, the personal needs profile, and then after the test are actually given, you can access the reports. So it's really targeted for those administrators that are setting up users into the system, making sure all the students' information is in there, all the test materials, and as well as all your report data. You may be asking, well, I'm a technology coordinator, do I need access into the portal? The answer is yes, you do need access into the portal. We'll talk through that here in just a short while, but yes, you do need access into the portal, and there's a specific technology coordinator role within the system to make sure that you have all the proper needs, access to the sections that you need. The second component is TestNav. So TestNav is actually the student test delivery engine. So this is the application that you download onto the desktop or the machine that the student actually going to be testing from. It does comprise of the early warning system. This is very nice if the student's taking the test and the internet drops for some reason and it comes back up. It can actually connect back into the internet seamlessly if it's a short amount of time and not even affect the student whatsoever. If there is a particular shortage or an outage, it does allow, it notifies the students so they don't continue on with testing. There's no loss of data as well. We can get the issue rectified and resolved right away. The third component is something that's brand new. Last year we had what was called the system check, and that has now been replaced with called the app check. And that is a component that is built into the TestNav application itself. So it's a client-based tool, and it's used for assessing system readiness at the student's personal machine. So we'll go through that particular component as well. And then the last part is proctor caching. And I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and proctor caching is the last component that works with TestNav to reduce the bandwidth and for all the requirements of not only internet, but also content that's coming back and forth. And we'll review that in more details coming up. So again, 4 different components. The portal itself, which is the assessment administration portion. TestNav, which is really the student test delivery engine. This is where the student sits down and actually takes the test. App check, which is making sure that the TestNav client is ready. And then the last one's proctor caching, which brings everything together so that it's secure and most efficient for the student. One of the things that I've spoken to many of you throughout the year and last year already is around, where can I get all this information for technology? I know many of you folks Some are lucky enough to have a dedicated technology people on staff. Some don't. I know I've spoken to many folks that are driving the bus and actually getting up in the morning and teaching, and also have this on the lap of setting up technology on the side. So what I wanted to do was make sure that we have one central location, that when you're getting ready to set up ACT Aspire, that you have one central location that you can go for all your information. And that's called the ACT Aspire Technology Resource Landing Page. And the URL, if you don't remember anything from this training, this is the one to remember. And the URL is at the top there. It's http://actaspire.pearson.com. When you come to the home site, you want to click on the Technology Setup link, which is highlighted in red at the top there. And it gives you wide a range of information. You have the Technology Readiness Manual. So that tells us, what I actually need to do from a technologist to set up ACT Aspire. We have what are the system requirements for TestNav. We have special technology bulletins. Maybe here between now and April 10th, we have a couple of technology bulletins that we want to send out and make sure that everyone's notified. So all this information and communication is set up here. We also have where you can download the information around App Check. This is all brand new. This particular App Check component is brand new. So what is it? How to use it? How to configure it? How it plays into the portal, Proctor Cache, and TestNav. That particular trifecta. How does App Check kind of figure into that and make sure that you're configured properly? The second also has Proctor Caching. What is Proctor Caching? Why do I need it? Do I need it? What are the various methods that I can install it, and what are the requirements? All this information is loaded right on this page here. And the third section that's on here is the TestNav 8. If I want to be able to download it, what is TestNav? Excuse me, what are some various support pages that are here? Error messages that we might come into. It also has all the installers all on one particular page right in that TestNav 8 section. You also notice on the top right-hand section, it has our customer contact. Some more information about ACT Aspire. It has the 188 number, 802-7502. That's our customer service line to be able to call if you have any questions, as well as we have the email, actaspire_implementation@actaspire.org that you can email. So a wide variety of information all on one particular site. This is kind of your one-stop shop if you wanted to get some information as far as ACT Aspire. All right, so let's move right along here. One of the things I also wanted to mention was around some technical resources. So we do have 4 documents that I wanted to make sure that we cover. We have the Technical Readiness Manual. So this is, again, a manual that you can either download online, access in real time, or you can print it off as well. And it gives you really what the requirements are, the technology requirements are for ACT Aspire on all the 3 components, not only from the portal, but from Proctor Cache and TestNav. And what are the primary setup steps that you walk through. So that's a great document. The other one we have is Chromebooks. We found out over the past year and a half that Chromebooks are getting to be more and more prevalent into the system, almost as much as what we're seeing as desktops, and actually surpass what we're seeing with iPads even. So we created a Chromebook quick guide to be able to help the technology folks on not only configuring the Chromebooks properly with TestNav, but how can we manage that if folks are doing that from a central location, meaning that they have a dedicated server that manages all of their Chromebook devices all in one. So how those are managed and the different references are all included within that Chromebook quick guide. Many times we get questions about TestNav 8, and we started doing some connection tests, and we run into some errors in codes. So some of the things you can do is look at the list of codes and troubleshooting and just try to see, well, is it a connection issue? Is it something that the data is not on the Proctor caching machine? Is it not accessing the Proctor cache machine? is the test session not set up. So there's a lot of codes that are already pre-built into the system that it'll give you an error warning and actually dedicate that particular code. And you can look those up pretty quick and find out really what's going on. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to either give us a call or send us a quick email, and we're happy to help you out. The last one we have on here that I wanted to highlight was the Proctor Caching user guide. From a technology setup perspective, that seems to be one of the largest things that folks aren't used to, is setting up Proctor Caching. And there's so many good things that we've seen successful testing implementations over the years that it's actually it went from being highly recommended last year to something that we actually are requiring this year. We want to make sure that, you know, a Proctor Cache server is set up, and every time that we have seen it set up and configured properly, it's been a successful implementation of your testing experience. So something that has changed from going, hey, this is something nice to have, and when you do run into issues, this was a possible solution to, hey, let's just go ahead and require it for all users that are going to be taking the ACT Inspire portal, or excuse me, ACT Inspire assessment. So these 4 documents are available on the Wyoming Advocate site as well. So I wanted to highlight each of those. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about system requirements. So again, the 3 components and the requirements of those are the ACT Aspire portal. That's a web-based utility that you can access from, you can access it from Google Chrome, you can access it from IE, you can access it from Safari. It's anything that's web-based, which should be able to log into the portal. TestNav 8 is a little different. TestNav, we're going to go through that in a little bit more, but TestNav has many different setups depending on what devices and operating system you're going to be installing those on. So I'll review that here in just a second. And same thing goes with Proctor Cache. I'm going to review that a little bit more. But there are different requirements and components to each of these, not only from a portal perspective that's browser-based, but TestNav, which is app-based, and Proctor Cache, which is application-based as well. The requirements are all on that landing page that I mentioned, so that's actaspire.pearson.com underneath that technology section. And then we also have a lot of these references listed on the Avizit site, and if we put a little acronym on here to make sure that it's a little bit user-friendly, is ATP. And A, that means when you go to Avizit and you click on the A, you can look for the ACT Aspire Portal Users Guide that goes through and helps the administrators and the technologists go through and ask any questions about how to use the actual portal itself. And again, that's under the A section. If you went down to the T, which is navigation on the left-hand side, if you go on the T, there's a TestNav hardware software requirements. So it's a quick reference guide. If you click on T, it's one of the first top sections there for TestNav hardware and software requirements. The third one is P for Proctor Caching user guide. So there's specific user guides for all of these that are referenced again on the Avizit site. Okay, let's talk about TestNav here. I'm going to run through this a little bit. Okay, so with TestNav, we're going to talk about desktop specifically. If you are setting up TestNav on a Windows or Mac, the preferred way to be able to install it is by using the TestNav app. It's download from that landing page. You can do it from a desktop, you can do it from an iPad, and you can also download those apps from the Chromebook. We've moved away from the browser-based TestNav setups, and the reason was, browsers seem to be updating all the time, and there's a huge reliance to Java for our security. And Java was being updated almost 8 to 10 times a given year. They were putting different restrictions out, and quite honestly, it was just hard to be able to manage that reliance on Java, as well as put you through a configuration change on the schedule that Adobe set out. And so what that meant for us is at the beginning of a few years ago, before we had a browser-based implementation, we would go through like all the technology readiness. We'd make sure that everything was set up. Many times it would be like the first 2 weeks of testing, everything would be fine, and then they would come out with a new Java patch, and we would have to go through and configure our system to be able to be in compliance. And there was some issues there going back and forth. So I would say 95% of our users now use the downloadable TestNav app. There's no, it automatically upgrades and updates the system upon its initialization. So that means when you double click on the app or touch the app, if you're using an iPad or Chromebook, it will actually go out to the site, automatically download any new versions that it needs, and then go ahead and start the student to be able to go ahead and log in and test. If there are certain instances where, hey, I can't download the app, I can't use it, I don't have an iPod and Chromebook, I'm only going to be doing this on a Windows PC, you are able to use Firefox ESR 45. So that's one very specific browser that that we've done all of our testing on, that we know works with all of our applications and content. And that is one browser that you can install and run TestNav with. And those instructions are all included in the TestNav configuration document that we mentioned before. So again, I would say if you are going to set up either on a desktop, iPad, or Chromebook, I would have you lean towards using the apps. Those are have been almost a sure thing on being able to be strongly configured and secure into delivering the test content to the students. The another thing that I wanted to mention here was around the network configuration. I've been in contact with a number of folks that said, okay, I've set up my Proctor caching server, I have all the content, I've pushed out the latest version of TestNav, and it's still not connecting. There are a few things that you need to do to make sure that the TestNav app is going to be able to connect to the Proctor caching server to be able to get that content. And within your firewall, you need to make sure that you have, in content filters, you need to make sure that you have these four, addresses to be able to pass through your content filters and your firewalls. And what we've seen is that if you don't have these allowed and you have the system blocked for all these various content, they're not able to share data back and forth in a timely manner and in a very secure manner as well. All the data, just so you know, if you're worried about security, all the data is encrypted down to the Proctor caching server. It's encrypted when it goes back and forth between the Proctor caching server and the TestNav app that's running on the student's machine, and then vice versa. So, but I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this really quick, is that we put these four network configurations in here, and we highlight those for any firewall and content filters. Okay, now we get down to talking a little bit more about TestNav and the desktop app installers. So again, I'm going to continue to reference this. This is the technology landing page, again at act-inspired.pearson.com underneath the technology setup tab. And on the second half of the page is actually the installable TestNav sections. So if you are installing the TestNav app on a desktop, whether it be Windows or PC, you can click on, you can click on that particular button, and it gives you various options there. Excuse me. So if you look here from a Mac, there's a DMG that you can actually download and propagate to all of your devices. From a Windows perspective, you could actually download an executable, and if you wanted to go to every single device and do that and install it, you could. Or we also offer an MSI, which is a capability to be able to push that particular image to all of your devices in a controlled manner. And there also are Linux, Fedora, and Ubuntu 32 and 64-bit installations, which are not very prevalent, but they're available as well. We also have the iPad app that you can download, as well as the Chromebook app, all listed on that particular page. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about usage of how this is all starting to pull together. So some of you may think, okay, so I've set up everything in the portal. I have my Proctor caching server set up, and I'm going to be downloading the content to the Proctor caching server. How does TestNav know? How does the student's machine that has TestNav, how do they know that it's going to be able to pull the test content from my Proctor caching server? And how does it know that it's this particular student? And that's all handled through the username and password. So the information that's included in the student authorization ticket tells TestNav to go to a particular IP address and port that you designate within the portal that references the exact Proctor caching server itself. And that particular alignment for the content is designated within that username and password. The second thing that does is it contains the student-specific information, so it knows that it's Johnny and they need to take the English specific test, and that username and password corresponds with that information. Excuse me. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about App Check. So App Check is a new component to the ACT Aspire configuration trifecta, if you will. So if you remember last year, we had a utility that was called System Check, and System Check would go through, and you didn't have to install everything. You went into a browser and you could run it from whichever device to be able to put in your IP address and have a connection back and forth with the Proctor caching server. So now what we've seen is more and more folks are just using the TestNav app, and we've installed that particular function into the TestNav app itself, and we called it App Check. So instead of using System Check, now it's using what's called App Check. And what App Check does is it confirms the device and the computer is running on a supported operating system, and that it needs the version that needs to run TestNav 8. It also confirms that the device or the computer is configured to launch TestNav in their respective mode. So if it needs to be running in ETS mode, it'll verify that. And then it'll also verify the operating system to make sure that's up to the latest version. And it'll verify the connectivity from the student's device, testing device, whether it be a Windows PC, a Mac, or an iPad or Chromebook, that is going to be able to pull the test content from the designated Proctor caching server. So that handshake back and forth between the student's device and the Proctor caching server is what App Check is built to be able to do. It also provides some messages back and some error message that if you're having issues and couldn't resolve them yourself, when you called in the customer service line, it would be able to use that information for troubleshooting purposes. So you may be asking, okay, how do I verify that, or how do I go into use App Check? So when you launch TestNav for the very first time, you want to first verify that it's in ACT Aspire. So you can see that above the sign-in, you want to make sure that it says ACT Aspire. The very first time that you launch TestNav, there's a window that you'll want to be able to click on ACT Aspire, and you want to make sure that they don't choose either ACT or we've had kids choose Florida or some other state as well. So you want to make sure that you're logged in under ACT Aspire. If you're not, if it does say something different, you can click on the user button on the top right-hand section, that little user guy that's dark black in the top right-hand. And you can go down to choose a different customer, as you can see there, and that'll actually allow you to choose ACT Aspire. So you want to make sure you only have to do that once, and once it's there, it always remembers that configuration, always goes back to the ACT Aspire, which is nice. Okay, so let's go back to the app check. When you're checking your system, you want to be able to click on that user profile button in the top right-hand corner and select app check. That's the top version or top option in the drop-down menu. Again, it's going to validate the system requirements, and it's going to verify that TestNav can run on the workstation. And then once you click on app check, it's going to bring up this particular window. And you'll notice this is a little bit different. There's two options. One, there's what's called a configuration identifier. And if you don't put any configuration identifier into it, you simply just click on run app check. What it's going to do is verify that TestNav is able to go from the student's machine, and it has the proper internet connection to go all the way up to the ACT Aspire portal and download the test content. So again, this is not what we recommend. We want you to be able to utilize the Proctor caching server, and but this is a second method to be able to verify, one, you have some kind of internet connectivity. Excuse me. The second version that we really want you to run is the configuration identifier. And we'll go through that in just a second here. So if you notice underneath the configuration identifier that says optional, there's what's called an AC or Aspire dash, and there'll be a 5-digit number. This particular number will be generated within the ACT Aspire portal right next to where you designate what the IP address is of the Proctor cache server. So it's defined at that particular portion. You'll write it down, and when you get to the actual student's machine, you'll open up TestNav, you'll open up, select app check, and then you'll write down that or type in that particular Aspire dash. In this case, it was 28473. You'll click on the run app check, and it'll run through its diagnosis. It'll make sure. So this was done on an iPad, so those were actually needed to be run in kiosk mode. So it verified that it could run into that particular mode. It verified that the connectivity passed to get to TestNav, the connectivity portion, and that it was able to actually get to the Proctor caching machine and download the content to be able to run the test. So the best thing you can do is run to get those 3 green lines there. If you, just so you know too, if you did not put the configuration identifier and you just ran the app check, so it looked like this, and you run app check, it would give the first 2. It would tell you that the kiosk mode passed and the connectivity to the TestNav passed, but it would not give you the third one that says Proctor cache passed. So it's 2 different configurations of the app check. So I'll go through this a little bit more about where you get that configuration identifier. So remember back when I was going through the schedule and we talked about, from a technology coordinator, do I need access into the portal? The true answer is yes. You need to be able to set up the Proctor caching settings, the IP address of the server itself. You need to designate the port, and you also need to be able to download the test content and manage the test sessions. So what the test coordinator function does is that particular role allows you to be able to perform those functions. So going back to where do I get this configuration identifier, that Aspire-28473. So you would go into the portal itself, underneath the organization section, and click on the Proctor cache settings drop-down menu. From that, it's going to open up this particular window that'll designate what your school is, where your district is, what your code is. In this bottom section here that says Proctor cache server details. So if you set this up last year, this is very familiar to you. It's the code that you'll use for the IP address of the actual server itself. 9 times out of 10, you'll always use port 4480. But the one thing that's different now is underneath there, you have that app check configuration identifier. So after you put your IP address in there and hit save, it'll create that aspire dash, well, in this case, it's 28473. What that means is that from a TestNav perspective, you're able to connect from the TestNav student's machine to the designated Proctor caching server. So utilizing that particular IP address and that port of 4480. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to go back one more time. So if I'm looking at a student's machine, I'm running my app check to make sure that I'm able to download content and connect to my Proctor caching server. I'm putting that aspire dash. Now this is specific to the test, so it'll be different. The 5-digit identifier will be different specific to you, but it'll be 28473. You run the app check and you'll be able to verify that the mode is being able to be passed, that you have the right operating system connectivity, and that you're able to connect to that Proctor caching server. And if you aren't or don't have, if you aren't able to do either one of those, it'll give you a red message that says that it failed and the reason code behind it. So hopefully that's a little bit more user friendly. So again, I know this is brand new, so I want to make sure I'm covering it. Underneath the organization section in the portal, which is actaspire.org, you go to organizations and you go down to Proctor cache settings. That's going to give you this particular manage Proctor caching detail screen. And you'll look at the bottom here where it says app check configuration identifier. So hopefully that puts a little bit more clarity there. So for new folks who are wondering what Proctor cache is and the reasons behind it, so Proctor cache is a supplied software that we use in conjunction with TestNav, and it reduces the bandwidth requirements and accelerates the delivery of test content. So it's a central location. When I talk to folks from a technology point of view, I talk about the differences of being able to have the communication back and forth between an intranet, meaning that locally within your school, your brick and mortar school, the communications that would happen back and forth between that particular device and a student's machine, and all it's doing is talking back and forth between that intranet itself versus the internet, which is going through your internet service provider and sending packages back and forth. So you can kind of see it's reducing the redundancy of not only packet sizes that are going back and forth with information, but connectivity and issues that can be identified. So in short, it allows the pre-cached test content to be local on your network before the actual test. It's all encrypted. It reduces the burden on your internet service provider, your ISP, by eliminating the redundancy and requests for the test content itself. And it stores the encrypted local copy of the pre-cached test. And the big thing that's changed, it's now required due to all of its benefits. We get a lot of questions about, all right, do I need this big, huge server to run the Proctor cache server itself? The answer is no. It's a very lightweight utility. The biggest component of it is that it's really from a network standpoint to make sure that from all the students' devices that they can connect to that particular server and back, and that information can be sent back. So as long as that network connectivity works through the firewall, and to make sure that it's allowed to be able to get data and send data back and forth, that's the biggest hurdle. So it's 1.6 gigahertz machine on the Intel 2.0 gigahertz processor is not very not sure they make those anymore, but it's not that big of a machine, as well as a 1 gig of RAM. So again, we want to make sure that it is available to run on both Windows and Mac. You cannot run it from a Chromebook or an iPad. It does need, and the reason is because it needs to be able to download that content and to be able to write to that content on the disk, and those devices sometimes don't allow you to do that. It also runs as a service, so that's another reason why we want it to be run on a Windows or a Mac OS. And then again, it uses those particular ports, those TCP ports of either 443, 4480, or 4481. The big thing I do want to highlight too is that it does require a fixed internal IP address. We don't want that to be where it's a rolling IP. I've seen it happen many times last year, even where we had everything set up. I worked with a few schools that had everything set up a month or two in advance. They went to go test the beginning of April, and none of their devices could connect to the Proctor caching machine. And the reason was because they had that on a month rolling activity. The IP rolled every month and was brand new. And so all the settings for all the test sessions were set to that specific IP address. So please make sure that if you designate a Proctor caching machine, that it is a machine that is going to stay fixed, and the IP is not going to change, and at least during the window of the testing window. And again, the processor for the hardware requirements, the memory is listed there, and also wanted to highlight the software requirements. This is another little window that talks a little bit about Proctor caching diagram. Again, it kind of reiterates that without the Proctor caching, this kind of simulates the Proctor caching server up at the top that sends packets of information through the internet down to all of the students' machines that are set on the left-hand side, so that each testing computer must individually connect across the internet to download test content. And what we're finding is that when that is set up without Proctor caching, it's competing against all the different wireless traffic, and especially with wireless access points now, where we're finding with students not only using their devices that they're going to be testing from, but also, you know, they have their phones, they have their iPads, their Chromebooks, whatever devices that is competing against that connectivity. You know, with the internet back and forth, it's hard to be able to manage that type of bandwidth and replicate that on the day of testing. So with the Proctor caching server, at least you're able to hone down, you know, the connectivity points, so that each of the students are only referencing the content and data on that respective Proctor caching server, and they can complete testing without and pull that test content, you know, in encrypted format, secure, to make sure that you know, they go through the rest of their test undisrupted. Let me go to that. I wanted to highlight the installers that are here. There are new Proctor cache installers since spring of 2016. I have not seen this lately, but they did do a pretty major upgrade of Proctor caching in the summer of 2016. So if you did have the Proctor cache server set up and for spring of 2016, it's a good idea to go ahead and just uninstall it and reinstall it with the new software. Again, those are both on that Technoology landing page, as well as we have it linked here, and there's also references on Avocet as well. So again, if you have not uninstalled from last year and reinstalled your Proctor caching server software, it would be a good idea to go ahead and do that now, especially before we get to where you can download all the content. It's good just to go ahead and remove all the test content that was there for last year, remove all that content, remove all the data for it, and reinstall brand new. And so that starting on next week, we can actually download fresh new content for spring of 2017. The other thing about project caching that's nice too is that it runs as a service. I think I mentioned that early. It's defaults to that. So for some reason, there was some type of maintenance performed on the actual project caching server itself, and it had to reboot. That service would automatically come up and be available, even though the actual machine was rebooted. There's also ways to be able to stop and start the service. The shortcuts that are created within the program files, and as well as a designated folder on the Mac. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight as far as the actual project cache application itself. So from a technology perspective, one of the things that we want to make sure we do after we get the software installed is to download all the test content. So the test section at the top is where you download all of the 5 subjects for spring of 2017. We'll be looking for the EHS, which stands for Early High School, and that'll be all the 9th and 10th grade test content. And that particular screen will show all that particular content downloaded there. The second portion, which is the Clients tab, that's also pretty neat to be able to watch on the day of testing, and it displays all the various IPs of the devices or machines that are connecting to that project cache server to get content. So on the day of testing, it's nice to go down to the client section of this and to make sure that everything is green, which means that there's nothing that's being held up. All the connections, all the students' machines are able to connect to the project caching server itself and pull content in real time. So that's a pretty neat thing to be able to do from a technology perspective. It also tells you if something's going on in mass where a whole room is not able to access the machine, the project caching machine itself, you'll be able to see that, or if any issues or warnings come up. So that client preview screen is pretty neat to be able to do that. And then the settings screen, it does have, I would say, it does have a very unique password in the project cache software itself. It's designated into the manual. If you would like to change that to a custom one, you are able to do that in the settings section. You can put the initial password in and change it to whatever you'd like to. And what that does is allows you to purge and reload all new content whenever you'd like to. Let me move through these. So again, we're going to manage the project cache sections within the portal. So the kind of trifecta of how this is going to work is the students' information and the test information itself, what students are going to be tied to what particular test, is all controlled within the portal. How that information is tied to the respective content or the project that resides on the project caching machine, that's all designated within the portal underneath that organization section down into the manage project cache section that I highlighted below or highlighted before. So what that's going to do is be able to tie that student's information and test information to the test content that's downloaded on according to that specific IP address and port of 4480 to that project cache server. So all that is done within the portal. And then lastly, it's also going to give the authorization tickets so that when you go into those students that are going to be logging in, you hand an authorization ticket that ties that username and password to what you created in the portal to the content on the project caching server. So again, it's kind of the ACT Aspire trifecta there. You are able to manage all the project cache settings within the portal. There's no need to configure individual workstations. Once you have the the TestNav app installed on the specific device, that's all you need to do. You can run the app check to make sure that you're connecting to the project cache server. And after that, everything else is done within the portal. So according to those test authorization tickets. So TestNav will detect and use the entered settings, and we'll set the proctor caching setting for the district and schools, and then the default settings can be applied to the test sessions. So that's how all those are tied together. Again, I wanted to highlight this. This is the Manage Proctor Cache screen. So again, this is from a technology point of view. You would go to this particular machine to put the IP address of the Proctor caching server. So in this case, it is 10.25.180.194. We want that to be a fixed IP. We don't want that to change between the setup and the time that students take the test. And predominantly, that particular port is going to be on port 4480. The other thing that's added is, again, on the bottom, that app check configuration identifier. So within the screen is where you get that identifier so that you can check between the students' testing devices and that particular IP address that you designate from the proctor caching server. Again, you would put the IP address in and click Save. I talk a little bit about pre-caching tests. So within the organization section, again, there's a pre-cache test section. And what that does is you can highlight, again, after February 14th, you can go through and do this. There'll be the grade will actually be EHS, which stands for Early High School. And it'll be for the spring 2017 test administration. There'll be 5 different subjects. You want to make sure you download all the test content for all 5 subjects. And you'll click on the pre-cache button, and it'll actually connect to the proctor caching server and download all the content. Okay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about infrastructure trial. And it looks like we're getting close to the hour, so I'll kind of go through this a little bit quicker. The infrastructure trial. So if you were participating in ACT Aspire last year, about half of you went through the infrastructure trial, half didn't. What the infrastructure trial is a dress rehearsal of the computer-based assessment. And from a technology perspective, folks use dress rehearsal. From a technology perspective, I like to say it's a sandbox. It's a way to be able to go into an environment that's within the ACT Aspire portal. There's going to be fictitious students loaded in there, but you can go in and actually test your configuration and make sure that all the connectivity points between your particular student's device and the proctor caching server and what you have set up within the portal are all linked. And the nice thing about doing that is you can change it as many times as you want. You can save it, delete it, do whatever, change proctor caching servers, and it's just that. It's meant to be a sandbox to be to use as much as you possibly want to. We do want to say that in the infrastructure trial, we don't want to be uploading live student data, so that's a different tenet. We don't want to be able to upload live student data on that, but we will provide some sample students that you can use for verifying connections. The other portion of this, it's this dry run that we use for dress rehearsal or sandbox environment is good to be able to test to make sure that your test nav is configured right, that your device can successfully run test nav, and that's making that jump back and forth. It's also nice to be able, if you're testing at a given time from 4 or 5 different rooms, it's nice to be able to use that environment to just make sure that everything's configured right and that the load is going to be set up correctly for in your network during testing. It's really, really nice to be able to do that in an environment that's going to simulate production, but if you have any issues, it's always better to see that early on rather than get to the beginning of April and you run into particular issues. And then the last thing I will also mention was that it's nice to get staff to understand exactly what they're going to be doing from an administrative standpoint. So as well as you could actually have students log in. If they wanted to go in, there's going to be a fictitious test on there, but it's nice to be able to go in and log in and say, if your particular student, what am I going to do on the day of testing? How is that going to be like from a room supervisor? How is that going to be like within the portal? How do I start the test sessions? How do I see if the students are in there? What information from a username and password am I going to give them? And then from a technology perspective, how is everything coming together? Is it, is everything that I get set up within the portal matching to what's on the TestNav application is going to be accessing directly from the ACT Aspire Proctor Cache server? Do I have everything set up and that infrastructure trial environment is set perfectly for that? One thing that I wanted to denote really the differences between going back and forth between the live production system and the infrastructure trial tenant itself. They're called tenants, and that's really synonymous to like an environment within ACT Aspire. So the top image here shows what you see when you log into the portal itself. You'll note that the red circle of Wyoming has a little house next to it, and that's going to tell you what tenant you are tied to or where you are logged into. If it says Wyoming, you are live in production. If it says, I'll switch over here in a second. If it says infrastructure trial, which is on the bottom here, you are in that sandbox type environment. I'm going to go back here. So when you log into it the first time, it'll be able to say, it'll say Wyoming because it'll be production. What you want to do is click on the where that blue circle is. You'll click on that particular user. You'll want to go into the edit profile screen. And what that'll do is bring up this page that's below here. It'll bring up the my profile details. And you'll see that the current tenant is set for Wyoming. Now, when you go into it, you'll click on that button and you'll only have access to be able to switch between Wyoming, and it'll actually say infrastructure trial _ WY. And that's how you switch back and forth. You hit apply, and then you'll go into this particular screen, which says the infrastructure trial _ WY. On the bottom here, we show that the infrastructure trial, well, then the tenant itself, where the home link is, will actually switch to infrastructure trial _ WY. And for that, it designates that you're specifically in that testing environment, and you can go ahead and do whatever, and you're not going to mess up anything that your administrator or anything like that is doing with students or configuration. So again, I'm kind of switching back and forth. You start off with Wyoming. You want to click on the user guy where the blue circle is. You'll click on my profile, or edit my profile. That'll give you to this bottom image that says profile details. You'll click on the current tenant of Wyoming, and you hit the down arrow, and it'll say the only other selection will be infrastructure trial WY. You'll click on apply, and then up in the top, you'll see that it'll switch from where the house is. It'll switch from Wyoming to infrastructure trial WY. So after you've done that, you can switch back and forth between the various tenants and the various sections. One thing that I would like to state, we are doing something a little bit differently than what we did last year. Last year, we had a general infrastructure trial site that was for everyone. That got to be a little hectic because people were changing IP addresses of the schools all over. And so it was hard to conduct testing even for a few hours because people could actually go in and change the settings. What we ended up doing this year is mimicking exactly what's in. I'm gonna do that really quick here. Mimicking exactly what's in the live production site. So there is one particular question, where do we find the Proctor password to delete the cache content? So that is actually on the Proctor caching guide. And that, I'll actually just tell you what it is really quick here, because it's not very predominant. That particular password is T35, T is in Tango, 1, N is in November, and 6. So that's not the most user-friendly, but it's very cryptic and secure. And that's kind of the generic one for, I'll go ahead and make that to everyone. So again, the Proctor caching password for deleting the cache content is T35T1N6. And again, you can go into the settings section and change it to whichever you'd prefer as well. That's a default one. Okay, so we're wrapping up here. We have any questions? And then I wanted to mention here right before we get into questions that we do have customer service. We have the call-in number, which is 888-802-7502. That's available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. We have the email, which is actaspire_implementation@actaspire.org. When you do call in too, I also recommend that you choose option 8, which is for Wyoming. And then one last thing I wanted to mention, if you'll notice on the bottom left-hand side, I added, this is kind of a snapshot of something that we added. We added a chat functionality. So if you're in the portal and you didn't want to call in or use an email, you can click on, it's the second box and then right next to the Wyoming section, you can click on that chat function. It'll open up another window, a little pop-up, and you can connect and get tech support directly with an agent through a chat session. So that's something that was recently added at the beginning of the year, and just another way that you can get more support. So at this time, I'm going to go through and unmute you folks, hopefully. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone, and feel free to ask a few questions before we shut things down. Any questions before we move down?
Does the version of the Proctor cache matter?
There is a new version of Proctor Cache from last year. So if you haven't upgraded the Proctor
the reason
Cache
I'm asking is because I went and downloaded the newest one that says it's 2016.9, and on your slide it was 2015 point something else. So do I need the 2015 version, or is the 2016.9 sufficient?
Whatever is downloaded, they update that a couple of times throughout the year. So if it's, I'll have to go back and look at it. It should be whatever is out there. Let me look real quick here.
And the second question is, do we need to run the app check on every computer that's going to be connecting, or just on one to make sure it's working?
You know, that's really up to you. It's to your preference. Typically, if it works for one in a particular room, it'll work for all.
All right.
But that's really up to you, what you would like to do. See what the version is here.
Okay, but it doesn't do any settings special. That it's just a test. It doesn't. You don't need to run it on everybody because they'll find their settings when they log in. Correct?
You're exactly right. Correct.
Okay. I think last year we did have them all run through the app check, but
yeah, it's nice to be able to. It's nice to be able to run that a few times, and you may run it early on and just make sure, you know, if you come a week before testing, it may be a good idea to run it on a few machines beforehand. The other thing is, it's also good, excuse me, it's also good to make sure that if you have different devices, meaning that if you're running test math from a Chromebook versus an iPad versus a Windows PC, it may be good to run it just on each of the 3 different configurations to make sure they're all able to connect directly to your Proctor Cache server.
Okay. And then when is the test window or the practice window open?
So the practice window, that will be set up by middle of next week. So the infrastructure trial site we're in the midst of doing that right now. We're getting ready to push all the organizations so it mimics exactly what you have within production.
Okay.
So by middle to end of next week, that should be all set up.
I was saying, I couldn't switch current tenant yet, so I was assuming it's not up yet.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
That's all my questions.
Any other questions?
Yeah, with the, or is it deck? Is that what's going to be posted on the WE website?
Can you tell the ladies in the background to quit talking? We can't hear what's going on.
There you go. Say that one more time.
Okay, is the presentation slides that you just shown us, are those what is going to be posted in on the WDE website for our future reference?
Yeah, we'll have that on our Avocet site. Not only we can actually do both. We can put the slide deck out there, or we can also put the recorded session that has the answers to all the questions as well.
Yeah, I think the slide deck would be one of the most useful because it's very, very tightly written.
Sure. I can work with WD to do that, so no problem.
I'd like to see in PDF format that step 6, or step 1 through 12 placed out there somewhere. That was very helpful.
Okay. We can definitely do that. That, I believe, is out there. I'll look and see. There you go. This particular one. Yeah, so that would have that on. I believe that's already out on the website, but you can either access it through PDF here, or you can access it on the Avocet site as well.
Thank
Great.
you.
Sure. Okay, folks. Well, again, I just wanted to reiterate, we are going to have the same training again next Tuesday on Valentine's Day. So that'll be another technology readiness training. We are going to record this one, make that available on the Avocet site, and I'll talk to WD, make sure they're fine with me posting the actual slide deck as well. Usually it takes about 24 hours for me to get that posted to the site, so hopefully by tomorrow afternoon you should be able to see it. Appreciate everyone's time, and look forward to a great spring assessment. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.